Good to be back in the conversation. We are going to be exploring some very interesting ideas this morning. Um, this notion of mysticism is going to be brought up and hopefully worked into a very practical way of experiencing our present life with the mystical, making it very real world in a sense, you could say. And we're going to focus mostly, I think, on this notion of faith. We've been conditioned to think of faith as this pie in the sky kind of a hope. You have no evidence, but you believe anyway. I think that we're going to see that faith actually is the perfect way that human consciousness interfaces with reality. And we're going to see through this notion of how what we call reality through the five senses is really just such a dim picture of what's here and what this is. And so I wanted to start with a few fun facts. Maybe some of you, most of you might know. But starting off with this notion of what the universe is made of. And so it says that visible matter is only 5% of the universe. And then it says dark matter is 26% of the known universe. And then dark energy makes up, the 69% of what's in the universe. And so most of the universe is either dark matter and dark energy, right? And so we have a very thin slice of what is visible, sensorial matter, right? And we think we know what reality is based on this very thin slice. And not only that, but the electromagnetic spectrum is the only thing that we can perceive. So even though matter makes up 5% of what we encounter as the universe, what we experience of that 5% is 0.0035%. So we're in Plato's cave. We are looking at shadows on the wall, and we think these shadows are reality. And we're so in this hypnotic spell of thinking that our thoughts correspond to what's really here and what's going on. And we are, again, perceiving 0.0035%. And it's all overlaid and distorted with our cultural biases, our paradigm blindness, and everything else that we can kind of add into the mix. So in other words, as the scriptures are fond of saying, the unregenerate mind is blind, deaf, dumb, and lame. Like we have no capacity to experience reality at the base level of our perceiving faculties. Like that's ground zero for our conversation this morning. That's why a couple of weeks ago we had a whole conversation on the power of knowing that you don't know, right? Because when we talked about Socrates and the Platonic tradition, Socrates, considered the wisest man in Athens at the time, said that he knew he didn't know, which gave him access to what he calls ho theon, the God, or his daemon, this higher voice that spoke, interdimensionally or transcendentally. And Socrates was able to listen, get the message, and then speak it in this wisdom that shattered the illusions of the minds that were open to receiving. Right? And it altered their perception and got them out of the cave. Right? They actually saw the one, the good, the true, the beautiful. And so mysticism is getting out of the cave of our false perception and being able to integrate this greater reality with the perceptual reality so that we can be harmonious, that we can be whole. Right? And so we're going to talk about that today. And this greater reality, this is something that's kind of on my front burner as of late. I just ordered a book recently. I haven't gotten it yet. but it's this idea of the book's title is is it The New Science of Heaven? And it's by Robert Temple. And he's exploring this whole field of plasma physics. And what's fascinating about plasma physics is plasma is considered the fourth state of matter, right? You have solid, liquid, gas, plasma. And when you think of plasma, there are different types of plasma. A good example of one type of plasma is our sun, right? And there are plasma fields that we know of now that are 138 billion light years across, plasma fields. And the plasma of the universe actually has this all-pervasive quality, and you've probably seen these pictures. The circuitry of plasma within the field of the universe is an exact correlate to your neural system in your brain. Do you see these pictures? If you were in the Disappearance of the Universe class, I was sending that out every week with the homework. It shows the brain, and it shows the neural or the plasmic circuits. And the neural field and the plasma field are synchrosimilar. And this gets back to that Hermetic adage, as above, so below, as within, so without, the microcosm and the macrocosm. In other words, there is a circuitry or a deep structure within the greater universe that is synced up to our neural system. And so we are transducing. Right? This is what Plato is calling the being, the field of being, and the field of becoming. We're transducing this transcendental field and bringing it into symbolic form through our nervous system. And so what mysticism is doing, and this kind of opens up the Jungian class for you Jungians out there that are taking our class, where the unconscious mind, the macrocosm, and the conscious mind, the microcosm, become harmoniously interlinked and in communication. That's why in A Course in Miracles, Jesus said the separation wasn't an act, it was a thought. And the thought is what severed the communication link between your awareness and God's mind. So the separation is happening through this severance of communication. Mysticism, this practical path of knowing that the kingdom of God is within you and opening to that plasmic field within the center of your heart, reconnects you to the macrocosm, and then you can think God's thoughts with him, right? That's what Einstein wanted, right? It's the goal of science. It's the goal of mysticism. It's the harmony or the integration of the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. You could put this in any kind of symbol system you'd like. It's the namaste. It's the coming together of the left and the right. We in the West are like, hey, how's it going? And it's all this, right? It's all thrusting forward with the masculine right, dominance, outward seeking, believe me, that's what that is. Believe me, I'm not going to hurt you, much, if you don't get in my way. But that's what that is, right? And this is a very different approach to life. This is, I'm actually full and complete within myself, and I'm in a connection to what is true and good and beautiful within me, and I see that in you. I honor that in you. In fact, that is me. I love you as myself, right? That's the second great commandment. I love you as myself because you are myself. This is the new paradigm, if you will, where we actually begin to recognize this interbeing and this one self. All right? So we want to explore a little bit of that today, and hope you enjoy it. So faith is the ability within our present level, our current capacity, to open to something beyond the known or the visible. That's the power of faith. And the word itself in the Greek is pisteuo. In the Hebrew, it's aman. In the Arabic, it's amin. In the Sanskrit, it's shraddha. And what you get within the etymology of all of these sacred languages is faith actually is a certainty. In fact, this gesture is what you get from the Hebrew aman. Hebrew is a very visceral, pictorial language, and aman is, solid. And so what faith puts you in touch with is something more solid than matter, than the sensory experience, right? Than the shadows on the cave wall. And so we want to look at a few things today. And one of the things that Jung brings up is that we all have this, what he calls a drive towards wholeness, right? This instinct to know God, essentially. And so this instinct or drive to wholeness is what brings you here, essentially, right? You want to know what life's about. Who am I? What's this greater self? Who's God? How do I find peace? What's lasting happiness? How do I feel safe in this effed up and crazy world? Right? That drive that brings you here is part of God pulling you towards him herself. Right? This is the way that we can know there's something beyond the lip of our own reason. That what drives you to know what's beyond reason is the very presence of that being that's pulling you. Right? This is the image we get from A Course in Miracles. The Spirit is pulling us towards itself. Terence McKenna called it the great attractor field at the end of time. Everything is being pulled into God, like rivers rush to the sea. Our consciousness, our mind streams are rushing towards the sea of God. And when we can become more and more present to that, we thirst for him. We hunger for him. We desire him above all else because we begin to have these glimpses, especially if we come through the valley of the shadow of death, when we're actually feeling the pain and the ennui and the nihilism of life as we're living it. Like, what's the point? How is this ever going to fix itself? My life's a mess, and my loved ones, they're not doing well. Like, everybody seems to be like up to here with the dark water. So it's like, what's this? Like, how do I get out of this? And when you go through that valley of the shadow of death, that veil of tears, that's oftentimes what brings you into this place where you're like, I'm ready, no holds barred. I want you above all else. I'm hungering for the truth. And then once you have that spark, there's nothing that can stop you in heaven or earth from finding his being. Right? But you have to believe, as it says in the Bible, it only can please God, and this is the biblical language, you can only begin to feel that attractor field when you know that it exists. You believe it. Right? This is that X factor of faith that can take you out of the closed circuit of your nervous system and open you up to the greater reality. You have to believe it exists. And the writer of Hebrews in the New Testament says, you have to believe God exists and that he is the rewarder of those who diligently seek him. In other words, you will be met. Ask, and you will be given. Knock, the door will be opened. Seek, you will find. If your intentions are pure and you are sincere and you want it above all else, you will meet your God. No doubt about it. I mean, in my own little way, I've touched the hem of his robe, and I know that I know that I know. And there's nothing that will ever dissuade me from that experience of knowing. He touched me, and I know it. And when that touch comes, and I just had this conversation with Lisa, when that touch comes, it's like you weep. Because like finally, it's like something real. Like this is true. Like this isn't just story time. This isn't just metaphysics. This isn't just conceptualization and intellectualizing. This is real. And so you touch that and it touches back. And that puts you on a completely different trajectory. This is a psalm from the Hebrew Bible. As a deer longs for streams of water, so I long for you, O God. I thirst for God, for the living God, right? Not the dogmatic religious God, not the intellectual God, the living God, the pulsing God. And it stands to mention here that God's name in the Hebrew Bible is the Lord of being, Yahweh. Right? Yahweh is a construct of the past, present, and future tenses of the verb haya, to be, Yahweh. He who was, who is, and who will be, being. That's why, we're going to be studying Joel Goldsmith, and Joel Goldsmith was always fond of saying, God is. This isness is being. Your consciousness, your awareness right now is isness. We don't know the root of our own being because we don't really know the verb to be as a lived experience. We've lost communication with being, with isness. That's why meditation basically is sit down, shut up, and listen. And when you listen, you actually have no investment in putting your ideas on the present moment. They evaporate. And what emerges in our awareness is what is. And if we're really listening and we're really surrendering and we're really emptying and our thoughts are being purified, our hearts are pure with their intent, we enter his holy mountain, symbolically speaking. We interface with the greater plasmic circuit of the universe. And above and below become one state. The will of heaven and earth join in this complete namaste. Atman is Brahman. I and the Father are one. Now, if you can't accept that for yourself, the communication link has been cut, and you've told yourself this story that has spun you out into no man's land. And what's going on in that reality, so-called, is you're living an isolated existence. And as a result of that, suffering is a constant feature in one way, shape, or form. That is the effect of the loss of communication, is suffering. The only remedy is to turn around, leave that life, and go to the home of or house of your Father, right? So spirituality is first and foremost the recognition, as we said it last week too. Sometimes I look out, and this is just my own reflections coming back to me and helping me heal, but sometimes I look out and I'm in this ecstatic state of recognizing the possibility of this experience and what's being offered. And sometimes the faces look so far removed, lost in thought, consternation, depression, and I'm thinking to myself, how could that be the response to this? And this is why we get lost in our own way of hearing what's being said. If this isn't good news, Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, then you have misplaced and misdirected loyalties. If this isn't good news, having you and your Father join in this love relationship in the present moment, where you know that you know that you know that eternal love is yours, that you are this, that everything is this, that God exists and you are God. If this isn't good news, and really the solution to all of your problems, if you're not hearing it like that, then know that you have misplaced and misdirected loyalties. You're serving a lie. You're worshiping a self that doesn't exist. You have other agendas that you would rather have than be in communication with reality. Right? So this is one of the first things that we have to do. That's why the way of the mystic is 3 steps: purification, illumination, and then union. Purification means we got to, basically bring to heal all of these shadow thoughts. Paul says in 2 Corinthians, he says, for though we live as human beings, we do not wage war according to human standards. For the weapons of our warfare are not human weapons, but are made powerful by God for tearing down strongholds, which are these beliefs, these traumas, these fears and hatreds and resentments that we've held within the subconscious mind. These are the strongholds. They rob us of our peace. They actually hinder us from wanting to run into our Father's arms. We'd rather stay in the pig pen. We'd rather suffer than go home. Those are the strongholds. And don't kid yourself. We all got them. And they whisper and they pull and they tug and they have these feeling tones that make us unworthy or angry or doubtful or cynical or nihilistic. This is spiritual warfare, my friends. This is happening at a subconscious level of the mind. So you have to watch that. And when this isn't landing as good news, and remember, this isn't my message. It's not me. This is the message put into a certain form. And if it's not landing as good news, we have these strongholds in our life, right? We have these tendencies to side with the enemy of reality. For the weapons of our warfare are not human weapons, but are made powerful by God for tearing down strongholds. We tear down arguments and every arrogant obstacle that is raised up against the gnosis or knowledge of God. These strongholds, these arrogant arguments, these obstacles, they're all within your own consciousness. You don't go out busting other people's idols, and you don't go out making other people wrong because they don't toe the line of the dogma that you're buying into. Now, this is actually, you're clearing out your consciousness of the haunting and the demonic possession of your past. These things that literally throttle you and hold you back from going into the light. They keep you in shadow. They keep you in shadow. Right? And until you want out, you will be a slave to those impulses and desires. In fact, as Morpheus tells Neo, you will fight to protect that system. You will fight to make your illusions real. And you will hate the truth in whatever way it comes to you. So this is something we have to watch for. That's the first step of the mystic, purgation, purification. It's the first step of alchemy, psychological alchemy, the Negredo stage, this blackening. You have to go within and deal with your shadow. You have to look at yourself because that's the path to freedom. And Jung, as Jesus calls it, the narrow way. It's very narrow because it squeezes you. It makes you have to really look at things you didn't want to look at, that you were so intent on making other people's fault, right? Because until we're ready to look, until the misery reaches a tipping point and we're like, I want to go home above all else, until we reach that place, we try a million remedies and self-medicating. And what we're doing really is not only are we repressing the shadow because we're afraid to look at it, but that energy of the shadow has to go somewhere. And it's going to either go out onto a political figure or a nephew or a mother or a husband, or it can come back onto ourselves and we just keep beating ourselves up for what we should have done differently. Right? But until you're ready to deal with your shadow, it's going to deal with you. Right? So you don't get out of this, right? It's not easier to be on a path of denial, is my point. And what's really ironic is the liberty of the call is always going out day and night. And we can say yes at any moment. So again, as a deer longs for streams of water, so I long for you, O God. I thirst for God, for the living God. I say, when will I be able to go and appear in God's presence? Why are you depressed, O my soul? Why are you upset? Wait for God. For I will again give thanks to my God for his saving intervention. So this seeking actually comes to a place of silent repose. You want God, be still. Then you'll know. Be still. Right? So this is kind of the path of where faith brings us to the door of our own heart. Let's take a moment and find that stillness together. So in your own way, make your request known that you want to hear, you want to feel the divine presence this morning. You want to be shown how to lay your burdens down. And you want them replaced with the joy, with the safety, with the peace of his presence. So whatever will you can muster in the moment, will to lay your burdens down, will to let your past go, just for an instant, in a request that he come to touch you in this moment and change your life forever, to heal you psychologically, emotionally, and physically. And as we come to the silence and this open listening, We are taught that everything that he is and has is given to us. We have it already. Our prayers have been answered. So we want to lay our burdens down and let the blocks be removed so that we can know this eternal truth about who we are. We want to know ourselves. We want to be free of all limitation and lack. Because it's our birthright. And it's who we truly are. And so it is. So this is Evelyn Underhill's classic work on mysticism. And just wanted to read one quote from her. She says, the mystic is more reasonable than the rationalist. They find in that very hunger for reality, which is the mother of all metaphysics, an implicit proof that such reality exists, that there is something else, some final satisfaction beyond the ceaseless stream of sensation which besieges consciousness. Quote, in that thou hast sought me, thou hast already found me, says the voice of absolute truth in the ear of the mystic. I want to repeat that. In that you have sought me, you have already found me. In other words, the fact that you're looking for God is the affirmation that God is, that that's something already assumed to be true. Because why would you look for falsehood, knowing it's false? This pull, this searching for God, he says, is actually the finding of God. This is the first doctrine of mysticism. Its next is that only insofar as the self is real can it hope to know reality. So in other words, how can you seek for God unless you are God? Only God can find God. Right? This is why the path of purgation or purification is the first step, because there's a lot in our mind that has us thinking and believing we're not who we are. And that's what's upsetting us. That's what's causing us suffering. In the end, as Muhammad said, when you know yourself, you will know your Lord. Right? This self and God are of the same substance, the same likeness and image, to use the biblical language. So the first step is the searching for God is the finding, just in its early stages. And the second is only the self that can hope to know reality must be reality. Like is attracted to like. Yeah? Upon the propositions implicit in these two laws, the whole claim and practice of the mystic life depends. Right? And she uses this Latin phrase, cor ad cor loquitur, heart calls to heart. This is another reason why the path of purification is important, because we've been disconnected from our own heart, our own feelings, our own genuine sense of being. We're lost, right? This is what a lost person is. We're lost in our thinking, in our hallucinations that we're not the self of God, right? This is part of having to confront that shadow. Before we move too far out of this, The quote from the book of Hebrews about faith gets us right back into this recognition of how practical it is, being that we're picking up such a thin bandwidth of what the universe is, right? Our perception is only showing us 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum. We are completely in the dark. And so faith is this opening to the greater spectrum of consciousness and allowing that to begin to be transduced into our experience. So faith is necessary in this path of awakening. Faith is the power within the mind to ignite this reconnection. So the author of Hebrews says, now faith is being sure of what we hope for, being convinced of what we do not see. For by it the people of old received God's commendation. By faith, now listen to this, by faith we understand that the worlds were set in order at God's command, so that the visible has its origin in the invisible. So this is a complete reversal of the way that we live our life. We walk by sight. We are looking at appearances as if they're real. And they are very will-o-wisp, dim distortions of what's really going on here. And our faith has been completely given to our senses and to what we think about what we see and experience in this very small bandwidth. Now, when we walk by faith and not by sight, we're opening up to the fact that the invisible is giving rise to the visible. That the invisible is far greater and far more alive than the visible. And so this creates this new way of approach to our world and our life and our relationships, where we actually go within to find the resources, because everything is in the invisible. Everything we need is in the invisible. Is this making sense? So Joe Goldsmith in The Master Speaks tells us this: let us be willing to admit that there is God. God is. And God is omnipresent. If our daily affairs are not showing forth the fullness of harmony, health, wholeness, happiness, peace, and joy, it is only because we have not yet tapped that spiritual power. Talking or reading about it is not going to do it. Talking and reading about it and coming together in groups are only steps on the way. Each one of you must do what I had to do, he says. Prove it, demonstrate it, show forth that God is, and that God is available here and now. There is but one way in which this can be done. First, the recognition of God as omnipresent, the recognition of God as the soul or consciousness of your being and of mine. Second, the reliance on it. So you come back to the invisible, to this silence, to this listening, to this opening to the presence within the invisible, which is your very consciousness, the source, the root of your very being. It is being itself, right? And it's the being of all beings. That's the first step. That's why purification is necessary first, because like Paul said, we have to put down the obstacles and we have to subdue these impulses and things that are blocking and barring the way to the inner place or secret place of the heart. And then when we find that secret place, we become still. And then we know that this is the being of all beings, and then we learn to rely on it. Right? That's where faith comes in. That's where trust comes in. We get still and we ask God. He says in the scriptures, trust in Yahweh with all of your might and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, honor or acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. This is working from the invisible to the visible. This is going to the source of power and letting it shape and change appearances, rather than trying to fix things within the thin bandwidth of form. It's a futile experience. Joel goes on. He says, sit down for a moment of meditation, not to think about material things, but to think about the presence of God, and then wait until you feel that click, that little assurance of God's presence. If you do this, you will find whatever it is you're looking for effortlessly, that you will have the greater part of the day left for study, meditation, and communion. He says, by this simple method, every experience of your family life, from the simplest things to the most complex, becomes easy, peaceful, and successful. You know that God is. You declare that God is. Now prove it. Sit down and get the feeling of that presence of God and watch how it goes before you to make the crooked places straight. Watch how it opens up the lanes of traffic for you when you're driving. Watch how it does all things for you in your experience. How it even changes the attitude of other people toward you and changes their relationship to you and yours to them. The things that you and I cannot do humanly, it can do for you if you feel this it. That is the secret, you see, that there is an it called God. God is. But God is only available to you and to me in proportion to our contact with it. There has to be a contact. You have to be in and of that God consciousness in order to attain it. Yeah? And then lastly here, he says, the nature of God is our individual being. God is being. Unless we catch this idea of oneness, we miss this basic spiritual premise that there are not both God and you. The only way we can realize oneness is to understand God as you. That is the first point in the teaching. The question then comes up, how can that be? And he says the only reason why we ask that is because we think of God as apart or separate or dualistic from our consciousness, that God is a concept. That's why getting quiet, going within and listening is mandatory and coming to appreciate who you are and who God is. This is the only way, according to these teachings that are contemplative and meditative, in coming out of insanity. Restoring communication, connecting or reconnecting micro and macrocosm, living from the Tao, knowing that I and the Father are one, that Atman is Brahman, right? That I am Buddha. These are all symbol systems to the rediscovery of the power that we're sitting on, it's closer to us than our own breath. This is what the teachings are always pointing at. We have to become quiet. We have to lay our burdens down. We have to get out of this intellectualizing, problem-solving, worrying mind. Take no thought for your life. Don't think about what you're going to have to wear or eat. That will take care of itself. Seek first the kingdom of God above all else, and everything else will be added on to you. He'll make your path straight. Just don't lean on your own understanding. Get back into communication or relationship with the invisible. Kill or destroy the thoughts that are demonic, that are holding you back, by simply turning to the light. They can't stay in your presence if you've willed to be in the light. They can only hold you back if you want the darkness rather than the light. Right? So this is where we have these assessments and reevaluations during the purification process. But once you break that barrier, it's like you get out of the gravitational field of the earth. There's tremendous resistance as you're going up into the higher atmospheres of your subconscious mind. But once you break with the personal subconscious, it's like you're in this freedom and expanse. So it's always darkest before the dawn, but don't allow those voices to change your course or redirect you back into shadow. Lastly here, the Course has some interesting views on faith. Just read a couple of things that might do well to boost your inspiration and spiritual insight. So remember what we've been talking about. When we're living by the senses, walking by sight rather than by faith, thinking that the visible is all there really is, when it's such a limited experience of reality. The Course will call that faithlessness. Yeah? And he says, do not overlook that faithlessness leads straight to illusions. Faithlessness is the perception of a brother as a body. Okay? And the body cannot be used for purposes of union. If then you see him as a body, you have established a condition in which uniting with him becomes impossible. Your faithlessness to him has separated you from him and kept you both apart from being healed. You're a spirit, I'm a spirit. We are actually one in this unified field of consciousness. If we limit each other to the body, we split ourselves off from the direct union of the present moment. And that's faithlessness. That's saying God is not. Yeah? And then he says, your faithlessness has thus opposed the Holy Spirit's purpose and brought illusions centered on the body to stand between you and your brother. And the body will seem to be sick, for you have made of it an enemy of healing and the opposite of truth. In other words, by cutting your mind off from the greater field of the invisible, the body suffers because you've cut communication off. Now your problems do seem insurmountable, and the shadows do seem stronger than the light. It's because we've literally turned down the volume of our connection. We've cut ourselves off from the greater reality. He says it cannot be difficult to realize that faith must be opposite of faithlessness, but the difference in how they operate is less apparent. though it follows directly from the fundamental difference in what they are. Faithlessness will always limit and attack. Right? It could be an attack on yourself, your personality, or an attack on another. That's how you know you're in the limitation of faithlessness. Faithlessness would destroy and separate. Faith would remove all limitations and make whole. Faith would unite and heal. Faithlessness would interpose illusions between your consciousness and God. Faith would remove all obstacles that seem to rise between your consciousness and God. Faithlessness is wholly dedicated to illusions. Faith is wholly dedicated to truth. Right? Even if you don't feel, like some of us are feeling this and feeling the joy of it, but if you're still sort of in the alleys and torture chambers of your mind, know that. Get it clearly. And that can give you a little bit of light, just to recognize your unwillingness, your resistance, your refusal to go a different direction. Get your stubbornness, but realize you're not a victim. You're not a victim. And this isn't happening to you. That's really important to get. It's happening from you. Right? You're never a victim. You're causing it. And your refusal to accept a higher truth and authority just keeps making it worse. And day follows day, and that spiral will take you down to hell. And remember, hell is actually the ultimate place for therapy. Because what hell is going to do that you can't do up here maybe because you're still distracted, self-medicating, going out for little trips that are making you forget these problems of yours. But when you get to hell, you have to really look. And it will break you. If you're not broken here, you'll be broken downstairs. And then that's the beginning of the turnaround. He says in the Course, pain thresholds can be high, but they're not limitless. So, we can keep bashing through the barriers, road closed, you're going the wrong way, turn around, we just keep going. I'm driving. It's my life. And then you realize, you eventually come to your threshold. Eventually you break. Eventually it's too much. And it takes you into the realm of faith. And you begin to walk back. And your spiritual sight begins to come online. And in trickles at first, communication starts to come in. And the voice of your ego is now not the only show in town. Right? That begins to take you upstairs. But it can be a long and twisted journey if you're ignoring the signs. You're ignoring his hand reaching out to you. To have faith is to heal. It is the sign that you have accepted the atonement for yourself. By faith, you offer the gift of freedom from the past, which you have received. You don't use anything your brother has done before to condemn him now. You freely choose to overlook his errors, looking past all barriers between yourself and his, and seeing them as one. And in that one, you see your faith is fully justified. There is no justification for faithlessness. Faith is the opposite of fear, as much a part of love as fear is of attack. Faith is the acknowledgement of union. It is the gracious acknowledgement of everyone as a child of God and of your most loving Father, loved by him like you, and therefore loved by you as yourself. It is his love that joins you, and for his love, you would keep no one separate from yours, Each one appears just as he is perceived in the holy instant, united in your purpose to be released from guilt. And in your faith, he is released. You saw the Christ in him, and he was healed because you looked on what makes faith forever justified in everyone. So those are just words until we go within and make them real for ourselves. Now give me your money. Blue bag's going to go around. If you're joining on Facebook or YouTube, you can click the link below, donate to the service at 8 a.m. here at Unity. Thank you very much. Any thoughts, comments, questions? Tricia?
Faith helps me understand that we are one. Because when I can't see my brother in that realm, because my visible eyes see them as broken or suffering,
Mm-hmm.
I can go within and say, what I'm seeing here isn't real.
Yeah, it is the denial of God, what we're seeing with our senses. And we have to go in and reconnect. Because our brother is not his body or his problems. He's the Christ, just refusing it temporarily. As we are, until we don't. Good? We just acknowledge with gratitude the offerings here, and may they be charged with the intention to bring symbols of peace to the minds that they touch. And so it is. Amen. Thank you. All right, let's rise and seal the deal. And remember, there's more to you than meets the eye, my friends. You are 99%, really 99.9% invisible. These are just symbols of you. Start tapping into your potential by following him. Yeah? So as we rest in the light of the truth and open to the Holy Spirit, we come to realize that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day. Course in Miracles tomorrow night, 7